You are listening to KPCA LP Petaluma 103.3 FM and streaming online at kpca.fm. Welcome, listeners, to the launch of Women in the Situation Room, brought to you by your Sonoma County Commission on the Status of Women. I'll be your host, Tricia Almond, one of three commissioners representing District 2 and the current chair. Now, for those of you wondering, what is the Commission on the Status of Women? The Commission was established December of 1975 with the charge of taking affirmative action to eliminate the practice of discrimination and prejudice because of gender in the areas of housing, education, community services, and related issues. Since that time, appointed commissioners have worked tirelessly on a voluntary basis to keep Sonoma County's governing body, the Board of Supervisors, aware of the issues impacting women and girls in our county. Our mission is to promote equal rights and opportunities that enhance the quality of life for women and girls, and to address issues of discrimination and prejudice that negatively affect women in Sonoma County. In support of our mission through 2022, the Commission will be focusing on the issues of gender equity, the impacts of COVID as it relates to food insecurity and inadequate childcare, as well as voices of Sonoma County women. I'll be sharing details on what these ad hocs are working on and how to become a commissioner in a future Women in the Situation Room show, so stay tuned for another show. In addition to the ad hocs, the Commission provides mentorship to youth in the form of our Junior Commissioner Project. And through collaboration, outreach, and the work of our Legislative Advisory Group, the Commission supports efforts to encourage women to seek elected and appointed positions, eradicate human trafficking, prevent elder abuse, protect reproductive and healthcare rights of women and girls. And speaking of collaborations, with us today are representatives of two Sonoma County organizations, Mary Frances Welch, Executive Director of the Sonoma County National Alliance on Mental Illness, known as NAMI, and Debbie McKay, President of the Sonoma County League of Women Voters. Before we begin our conversation, I want to remind you, listeners, you're listening to KPCA LP 103.3 FM and streaming online at kpca.fm. Welcome, Mary Frances and Debbie. Thank you for joining the Commission's launch of Women in the Situation Room. Hi, Mary Frances.
Hi, Tricia. Thank you very much for having us.
Oh, I'm so glad you were brave enough to join me on this launch.
Happy to be here.
So let's start out with sharing the mission of NAMI and a bit of history on the organization, along with your personal history with NAMI.
So the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, is about 41 years old. It's a nationwide organization, and it came about just over 40 years ago after there were many state hospitals across the country that were closed, and thousands, tens of thousands of people who had been essentially housed in these hospitals for many years and separated from their families. When those hospitals were closed, they were released with the thought that they would be provided care back in their communities and that they'd all be better off closer to home where they could have a connection with their families and be supported by their families in whatever their journey toward recovery from their mental illness was. But what happened was that there were many promises made about funding of community mental health care that would replace the state hospital level of care. The funding has never adequately come through, and states and counties have been left on their own without much federal support to be able to provide these services. The families who welcomed back loved ones were left grappling with sometimes the issues that are related to having somebody with serious mental illness in your home. behaviors can be disruptive. There could be suicidal ideation or intent or attempts. They may be people who don't honor a schedule within a family. It just, in many cases, created ruptures within the family environment. And families felt they had no support, no professional support, no organizational support. And they began meeting in small groups. There were at least 9 different groups that met in the state of California alone. They just found each other and they tried to educate themselves about mental illness and about resources and learn about what they could do to make their life better for their family member and life better for themselves at the same time. And this was happening here. It was happening in the state of Wisconsin and in a few other states. And they actually merged and met at the University of Wisconsin at Madison in 1970 and agreed to form this alliance. And it's grown dramatically through the years. So it's much bigger than anybody, I think, had envisioned at that time. There are over 500 chapters across the United States. There's a national headquarters outside of Washington, D.C. Every state has a NAMI state office. And then in California alone, there are over 60 different affiliates. And so we are the affiliate for Sonoma County. And the programs that we carry out in this county are duplicated throughout the country. So we offer education and we offer support. And basically our programs are peer-led. That means that if it's a support group that's for family members supporting somebody with a mental illness, it is led by a family member. If it's a support group for somebody in recovery from mental illness, it is led by a person who is well into recovery from their illness. But it's never just lived experience alone. We provide training. And NAMI at the national level creates the curriculums that we follow for our classes and the training packages that people need to complete in order to be either a teacher of one of our classes or a support group leader. Answer enough of your questions. And here in Sonoma County, this is our 37th year that we've been around for quite some time. And we had an original group of family members who met in the Santa Rosa area, who were all parents of adult children who lived with schizophrenia. Mm-hmm. They found one another. They were part of this group that met and grew the national organization.
I have to say, personally, I wish I had known about NAMI, not quite 30 years ago. So 15 years ago with my eldest daughter. I felt like once she was released back to us, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to cope. I didn't know how to help her, and assumed that it was a one-time thing as far as a suicide attempt. And the only education I got was through reading, but I didn't do that reading until after the second attempt. And that's when I learned that usually if there's a first attempt, there's one within the next year. So I could have definitely used a support group.
Emergency room with your daughter the first time around and weren't told or warned that could happen.
Nothing. In fact, the doctor that was treating her, in front of her, to us, in front of her, they said, well, it was a good thing she took, I think it was ibuprofen, because if she had taken acetaminophen, she'd be dead. And all I could think of was, why don't you just pass her the gun right now? Yeah. That's exactly how I felt.
Emergency departments, they are high-tech medical environments. They are not designed really to be the right place for people in a mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. Assuming that someone hasn't, if they need medical care, that's a different issue. That should be resolved, and then they should be cared for in an mm-hmm. environment. They need soothing. They need being listened to. They need comfort. But our standard medical education for doctors who do not go into psychiatry, even for nurses, there is very minimal training about mm-hmm. mental illness And they have a lot to learn. I understand that. Not everybody can master this information. You know, what we teach and provide is certainly based on research. We work with the Center for Disease Control and the National Institutes of Mental Health. We're not just making this stuff up, what we teach. It's all based on research.
Right. When she was released from the facility, we sat with her and a social worker, and I just kept looking at her thinking, I don't want to take her home. It scared me to take her home the way she looked. And they said, no, she's ready to go home. And I don't know, a couple weeks went by and I felt like, okay, I can start walking to work again. And I walked to work and I get a phone call from him. And this is from her. It's like 6:30 in the morning and she's barely audible. And she says, Mom, I need you to come home. She should have been preparing to go to school. And I panicked, and I'd walked 3 miles away. I had walked. Thankfully, I knew somebody was on the way to work, took me back home, and she had cut her arms again. And I could not find a psychiatrist. At that point, we still had not found a psychiatrist because most psychiatrists don't want to deal with teenagers. So I ended up calling the insurance company based on her therapist's suggestion and threatened them that if they don't help me find a psychiatrist, they're going to deal with another suicide attempt. And that's how we got the psychiatrist, which was pretty pathetic.
Yes.
Very pathetic. Definitely, absolutely no support. And then there's the shame of, oh, this is in our family. That took time to overcome and then be able to share it and empower others that, watch for this. And since then, there have been other, girls in my Girl Scout troop, or other people that have said their daughter went through it or their son went through it. But there's definitely a lack of support. And I don't know how, I guess just not being told and maybe not doing enough research of not finding out an organization like yours.
Right.
I don't know if it would have benefited her because she didn't like group situations and still doesn't, but it would have helped me. It might have helped our other daughter.
And with help for you, you are more equipped to be the support person that your daughter or your loved one needs. There's just no doubt about it. Yeah. You need a safe place to be able to talk about your own fears and your own frustrations, and learn, you do.
Yeah. And unfortunately now, fortunately now at least, when she's a little off kilter, we're brave enough to say, are you okay? How are you feeling? Whereas before, there was a fear of asking. We didn't really want to know.
Yes. And we've learned that
yes.
You cannot plant the seed of suicide in someone's mind. It's already there. But in so many cases, it is such a relief to be asked because they are holding it up. They feel guilty. They feel ashamed. They feel embarrassed. They're worried about you. They're worried about whatever is going on in their mind and how it impacts on you. So what we have learned over the years is that it ask and listen to the response and let people talk about those feelings, talk about what's going on. So important.
And there's also protecting them from people, for instance, a family member who said, oh, she's just doing that to get attention.
Very commonly said about young people. It doesn't really matter if it was happening for her, it was happening for her. She needed to release those feelings. But for years, I think it is getting better, but for years we attributed mental illness to laziness or lack of will, or why can't they just get over it? Well, I hate to say these are illnesses, and sometimes you don't just get over an illness. You don't get over heart disease or high cholesterol without some kind of intervention. And so these just don't miraculously go away on their own. You need to have treatment. You need to recognize the symptoms and then find help.
Yeah. So who can reach out to NAMI for help?
Anybody. Well, first of all, we don't charge for our services. We're here to provide service to anybody in Sonoma County, but we also speak very commonly with people who don't live here, but their loved one that they're worried about does. So we deal with both. And we have a warm line. It's a toll-free number. It's toll-free just because that makes it less expensive for somebody that might be worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
You're calling a local office. You're calling us here.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the starting place to find out about what we offer, how to get help. I wasn't in the office today, but I just came and took 3 messages. One person was asked to say she'd heard about our family support group, wants to know how to join. Very, very interested in getting that support. Another young woman called and said that her younger brother had just been arrested. He has schizophrenia. Was released from a psychiatric hospital a week ago, and she didn't tell me about the incident, but she said she pleaded with the officer to say he is sick and he needs treatment, not jail. But she was ignored, and he has gone to jail. And we will help her. We help many, many people who have someone that has been arrested, who has mental illness. It is so common for them because they get in trouble for loitering, for public drinking, or their behavior escalates within the house, and the family gets worried. The family might call 911 for help. The officer arrives, and the person gets frightened, very frightened, because they end up being handcuffed very often. We really do treat some of these crises, mental health crises, like criminal offenses, when really it's somebody that is sick and needs to be comforted and soothed in many ways. And that's why I know Sonoma County is looking at changing the model for how we provide crisis response to mental health emergencies. That's a topic being discussed across the country, but it's very exciting now because we are looking at this issue very seriously. And there are times if a weapon is involved, of course, law enforcement needs to be involved. But in so many of these crises, there is no threat of violence. There's just somebody whose behavior has escalated, has gotten out of control, and they need to be managed by somebody who's been trained in de-escalation techniques.
Okay, thank you. So in the past 8 months, we've been bombarded with COVID, wildfires, recession, job losses, educating our children at home, civil unrest, social distancing, mask wearing, homelessness, you name it, it's on the list. What impact is all of this having on our community members, and how are these issues impacting NAMI?
It's just layer upon layer upon layer of stress and uncertainty and not knowing exactly what's going to happen next, and difficult conversations, and tensions over, tensions in the political sphere, So our warm line has seen a spike in calls, but really many of those people are people saying, I'm lonely and I'm isolated, and that has to do with the restrictions around COVID-19. Many people are saying, years ago I experienced depression, but I've been just fine, but lately now I'm feeling it once again. And I think that we work a lot with the jail and families who have a loved one that's been arrested. I think I'd already mentioned that. But even within the jail, they are seeing people with increased acuity of their mental illness. And, the Sonoma County Jail is considered the largest provider of mental health services in this county, with something like somewhere around 44 to 50% of all of the inmates living with a mental illness. And it's a reflection of the lack of appropriate community services and the years in which we've been very hard on crime. We've arrested people quickly, but we're seeing everybody is stressed, and so people are reaching out to us. We have well over 100 people who participate in our family support groups, And we have nearly 100 people who have a mental illness but are in recovery. They're not in crisis, but they join our support groups. Everything's happening on Zoom right now. But we have never had so many people reach out to us for support.
So we're talking with Mary Frances Welch, Executive Director of Sonoma County National Alliance on Mental Illness. Mary Frances, are you seeing the mental health of women in our county being impacted any differently than that of the men?
Well, this has always been the case with NAMI. We always have a preponderance of women reaching out to us because I think it is so classic that, in this case, I'm really speaking to the mothers. So often it is the mother who lifelong has been there for their son or daughter as they've gone through life with a mental illness that may have begun when they were in their maybe late teens or 20s. And that mother never stops loving that child, of course. And so they are still there trying to help that adult who may not be doing well in life, who could be homeless, and the family is not in a position to take that person, may not be safe to have that person in the house. But the mothers never, ever stop caring. And they come to us because they need support. So they will join our family support group.
Thank you. So that kind of rolls right into my next question. We women have a tendency to be taking care of others, and such as family members, and putting them above ourselves. What advice would you offer to Sonoma County women in regards to self-care?
Well, first of all, I think that it's important to limit your constant focus on what's bad out there, your constant focus on whether it's social media or reading the paper. And I'm very prone to this. I love feeling like I'm on top of what's happening, not only in our county, but across the country. So we need to just limit that. We need to take time to relax, if possible. We need time to be in a space to do something that makes us happy or makes us feel relieved and not focused on addressing the tensions of the world or our county. And there are many, many techniques. Of course, there is meditation. We are offering now since March. We have offered Zoom wellness chats and check-ins. We do that twice a week, and we offer a support groups specifically for residents of Spring Lake Village, for example. So we're offering them opportunities to learn tools and techniques that help with relaxation, that help, breathing techniques, and a safe place to talk about the tensions. It's a mix of the two.
All right, thank you. So are women in need of different services or programs than men are? Or does it kind of equal out?
I don't think so, other than the fact that, as we just have mentioned, that women tend to be, always in the nurturer role. More so, and so perhaps they have a need for support, and they actively go after it. But no, I think men need it just as much.
Okay.
I don't see a real difference.
So,
I would go ahead. I just tell you about my own interest in I've been aware of NAMI for a long time. I have a background in public health and worked in hospitals, not necessarily in mental health, but in New York City and in Chicago. But then I did spend 4 years with the Department of Psychiatry for a large Chicago hospital. And so I knew the world of mental illness from that hospital-based experience. But before that, when I was in college, and I was actually a student abroad in Madrid, my father took his own life. So I never saw that coming. I did not grow up with a father that I considered mentally ill. But when he was 63, he was forced out of a job that he didn't want to give up. The company was closing, and he didn't find other work. But I also think there is never a single reason for suicide. It's an accumulation of stressors, trauma, things that have happened over time, and then maybe some breaking circumstances like retirement and being unhappy and not knowing how to fill that time. So he didn't have a role that he knew how to fulfill anymore. It happened very quickly. It happened in the course of about 2 months that he went from feeling badly to taking his own life. It was very rapid, but this was in the 70s. And my family was clueless about what to do, how to help him, truly clueless. I think things have gotten better today, but they did not know what to do. My older sister had insisted that he go see a physician, and the physician said, well, what's going on? And my father started to cry. Not typical. And he could barely talk about it, but he began to describe the fact that he couldn't eat and he couldn't sleep. And he was haunted by the fact that he kept telling my mother, I'm a burden on you, and, I don't deserve you. And all of those are such classic signs for suicidal behavior. But the physician said to him, well, I could give you sleeping pills, but they can be addictive, so maybe better not. And that was that. There was no other intervention. Mm-hmm. And again, that's a primary care physician who wasn't really trained in how you deal with this. And there are huge movements in this country to try to provide appropriate training and understanding how to screen patients among primary care providers. Mm-hmm. But we still have a lot of work to do. Anyway, so it's that experience that's always made my heart interested in NAMI and what we do. I'm just a total believer that education about mental illness is so important. And I think that we need to start with young people who are very open to it. Mm-hmm. And we need to, what I say is normalize the conversation. So mental health is part of health. And you have a broken leg, you have, kidneys that aren't working, you have breast cancer, we seek help and we fix it. And that's the same case with any kind of mental illness.
Thank you for sharing your story. So could you spend a few moments sharing with us your knowledge in regards to Measure O, which, if approved, would raise funding for mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, and housing services? Because I have seen some ads that are a little deceptive, it seems, claiming the passing of Measure O would take away funds from police services. So
Actually, it would not. What it would do is help pay for moving the model of how we respond to mental health crises to a non-law enforcement response. Mm-hmm. So that, the county has a mobile support team. These are clinicians who are trained to respond to mental health crises, but they have, because funding is very limited, they only work from 1 to 9 p.m., Monday through Friday in the county right now. And I can tell you that mental health crises happen at night, and they happen on the weekends. So that's just simply not enough. But part of what this funding would do is help move the model so that if a family were to call 911, anyone were to call 911 because of observing behaviors that they're worried about, the dispatch person could, rather than have a law enforcement officer go to the scene, have a mobile support team, or could be in a combination of a psychiatric nurse and an EMT. There are many different models, and the county is going to look at what works right here. But we're going to move toward a model, and I think there's a pretty strong commitment from both our Board of Supervisors and Santa Rosa Police Department to move to a model where it's less police response and more mental health clinicians response. And this measure is going to help cover additional hours for those clinicians. And the police forces in Santa Rosa is fully behind this measure because they're not necessarily the best option for providing this. But I have not heard any word of it taking away funds from the police department in any way. Maybe it's going to let them do what they do better more frequently, because they are on our streets every day dealing with people in mental health crises. And this is a reflection of the fact that community-based mental health programs are completely underfunded. Not all homeless have mental illness, but many do. And those people need to be connected with services. And often they are not. They're on their own. They need supportive housing. Taking somebody with a serious mental illness who cannot function on their own and just plopping them in an apartment, it won't work. They have to have supportive housing, somebody checking in on them, somebody checking to make sure they know how to live in that apartment safely, somebody checking in on them to make sure that they're taking the medications that they need to remain stable. And that doesn't mean round-the-clock care. Mm-hmm. It means, could vary from person to person, but community-based health can be much less expensive than the kind of care we're providing now, which is totally focused on expensive crisis care, because we wait until those crises happens and people need intensive care in a psychiatric hospital setting.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge on that. How can Sonoma County residents contact NAMI for services or even to volunteer?
2 ways. They can call our warm line, and that number is 866-960-6264, or they can email us at info@namisoco.org. And we have quite an extensive website that talks about what we do and what kinds of services we offer, and there's a calendar for them. And that is NAMI SoCo or NAMISonomaCounty.org.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll bring that up again at the end and remind me if I forget. We've been conversing with Mary Frances Welch, Executive Director of Sonoma County National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI. Thank you very much, Mary Frances, for sharing your wealth of knowledge. You're listening to KPCA LP Petaluma 103.3 FM and streaming online at kpca.fm. And now on to our next guest, Debbie McKay, President of Sonoma County League of Women Voters. Welcome, Debbie. I'm going to ask you the same first question. Please share with us the mission of the League of Women Voters and a bit of history on the organization, as well as your personal history with the League.
Well, the League is celebrating its 100th birthday this year.
Woo!
Yeah, we grew out of the suffrage movement, and when women got the right to vote, and that was primarily white women who got the right to vote because people of color were disenfranchised. But once that happened, women didn't necessarily know about the voting process, were not necessarily educated about the issues. So what the League did is the League started doing citizenship classes and educating people about the voting process, how to evaluate candidates, how to evaluate issues. So we continued to do that to this day. This last fall, we did 9 city and town council candidate forums, and we don't support any particular candidates. We're nonpartisan, but we want people to know what their candidates believe in and what their priorities are. So this is a service we do to the community so that they get a firsthand look on who's running for office. And this is an exciting year because there were probably more women of color and young women running than ever before for these offices. And so we're really thrilled about that. The other thing that's new this year, we feel like a large segment of our community kind of has gotten forgotten along the way and not really invited to participate because English may not be their primary language. So for the first time, we're getting our candidate forums translated into Spanish. And all of these are on our YouTube channel. And so people can listen to the candidate forums the evening that we do them, but then afterwards, if they weren't able to attend that evening, they can watch them on our YouTube channel. And the other thing we're doing is pros and cons about all the various ballot measures. There's 12 different state ballot measures, and then there's local ballot measures, such as Measure O that we just talked about. And we want people to be informed about those as well. So we have done videos on those. Unfortunately, our budget does not allow us to translate those into Spanish. But we also, the League has a state organization. We have a national organization, state organization, and then local leagues. And the state organization has a website called votersedge.ca. It's votersedge, actually, .org.ca. And there you can get both a Spanish and English version of the information on candidates, the information on ballot measures, and in fact, you can get it in several other languages. So we feel that's a good resource for people to find out about the ballot measures. Another thing we did this year to educate people is we actually did a video about how to run for office. And some of the people actually who were running this year said that was really helpful to them, because a lot of people don't know what's the process for running for office. And so we did a video on that, and that's on our YouTube channel. We also translated that into Spanish, has a Spanish voiceover. So we hope in the future, moving forward, that will encourage even more people to participate. So part of what the League is about is civic engagement and being a part of the community. So we also encourage people to serve on commissions, like the Commission on the Status of Women. We're trying to make people more aware of all the various commissions. The Board of Supervisors has over 100 different commissions and boards that people can participate in. And most of the cities and towns have boards and commissions that people can participate in. So we're really encouraging people to become civically engaged in the community. That's what our democracy is all about. It's all about us voting and being informed and participating in our government so that it's where we want to live. So it's the kind of community that we want to live in. And I think we're seeing more civic engagement. I mean, even going out and protesting in the streets is a form of civic engagement. Mm-hmm. It's letting people know we're not happy with the status quo, and it's having an effect. I think all of the mayors have decided to sign a pledge to take a look at their policing system, both what their policies are and what their training is. So people becoming civically engaged really makes a difference in their community. Voting really makes a difference in the community. And part of what the League is talking about is that the election is about so much more than who's president. I mean, we tend to think of a presidential election and it's all focused on who's running the country. But actually, who's running the country is from the president on down. I mean, it's our senators, it's our congressmen, but it's also our local elected officials. That's who decides, how the money, our tax money, is going to be spent. That's who decides what the priorities are in our communities. They set policy. So a lot of decisions that affect our daily lives are really made at a local level. So voting is much, much more than just who our president is. It's who's making a lot of decisions about our daily lives. It's making decisions about mental health funding. It's making decisions about what kind of health services people are going to get. It's making decisions about how much COVID testing we're going to do. So that's why voting is so important, and that's why we're so dedicated to making sure that people are voting and that they're making informed decisions. That's what we're all about, and the work never stops. We're not done. Even when the election's over, we're not done.
So how long have you been involved with the League of Women Voters?
I've been involved for about the last 4 or 5 years. What first attracted me to them was the forums that they did, and also what they provided information about the ballot and the ballot initiative. So I would always go to that when it was time to vote. I would use them as a resource. And then when I retired, I said, I want to get more involved in this organization. I use their services, so I want to get involved and help them do the work they do. Because on the local level, it's all volunteers. We don't have any paid staff. So everything we do is done by local volunteers, both men and women. We have both men and women in our organization. And anybody 16 or older can join. So we really try to involve the whole community in what we're doing through the volunteers that we have.
Thank you. So in that period of time that you've been involved, the 4 or 5 years, does this seem like a more exciting time than it has in the past? An exciting period? An engaged period?
It's both exciting and challenging. I mean, the COVID has changed how we do everything. So the social distancing has really made us rethink how we do our forums. We used to do them in person, but we had to do them through Zoom. We had to do them virtually. And, I always look for silver linings. So what are the silver linings in this experience? Well, we've all learned new technology that we're using for far more than just our league work. And we had over 4,000 people in Sonoma County watch our forums. So the 9 different forums that we had, there were over 4,000 people that watched them. And the one in Rohnert Park, was as many as 900 people watching that.
Oh my.
And before we'd have, maybe 50 people. I think our biggest was maybe 200 people. So we're reaching many more people. We're probably, even when COVID is over, not going to go back to doing them in person because we're reaching so many more people. And so things that we haven't never even imagined are the result of this. We had trained over 60 people about how to do voter registration because we'd go out to community events. Well, that's another thing we're going to have to rethink. How do we do voter registration now that we can't go out and participate in community events? So it's a challenging time to figure those things out, but it's also an exciting time. And like I said, I'm seeing more civic engagement than I have ever seen before. And I've lived in Sonoma County most of my life. I've never seen that level of civic engagement. I saw just today our registrar of voters put out the total people that had registered in Sonoma County, and it's over 300,000 people are now registered in Sonoma County. And the population of Sonoma County is only 500,000. And some of those people are not citizens, so they can't vote. And a lot of them are young people. So that means probably pretty close to the number of eligible voters are now registered to vote in Sonoma County.
Fantastic.
To me, it's wonderful. That means people are participating.
So is it too late for Sonoma County residents to register to vote?
Well, that's a yes and no answer. You can't go. Something that's nice right now is you can go online to register to vote. But if you go online, it's going to be for the next election, not this election. So if you missed the deadline, which was in the middle of this week, it was the 19th, you can still go and register to vote at any of the polling places that'll be open on election day. There's going to be about 30 polling places. Or you can go to the registrar of voters office and you can register to vote in person, and you can cast what's called a provisional ballot. And what that means is you'll go ahead and vote with your ballot, but it won't be counted until they verify your registration. Making sure you're a citizen, making sure you say you are who you have signed up as. And as long as they can verify your registration, your ballot will count. So it's not too late. People can vote up to Election Day and including Election Day, and they can register on Election Day.
Very good. We're talking with Debbie McKay, president of Sonoma County League of Women Voters. Debbie, I applied to be a poll worker. However, outside of the email stating my application was received, there's been no further communication. In the meantime, though, I've been asked to be a poll watcher. Would you please share with us the difference?
Sure. Poll workers actually are employees of the Registrar of Voters, and they receive training about how to assist people with registering and casting their ballots. So the polls this year are going to be open a little longer than usual. They're actually going to be open Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And so for those 4 days, people will be working at the 30 polling locations. And by the way, you can go and vote at any of those 30 polling locations. So you won't have just one polling place. And they're actually going to have laptop computers where they can bring up your ballot and you can vote. Wow. So they're training people on how to work with this new technology and kind of work with this new process. So if you're a poll worker, you're going to be assisting people with registering and voting. If you are a poll observer, you're going to make sure that people are not impeded from voting. So you want to make sure that nobody is interfering with somebody going into a polling place or getting their ballot. So you're just kind of an observer to make sure that nobody's rights are violated. So it's a more passive role, and you don't get actively involved in the process unless somebody needs help on knowing what their rights are, or calling for law enforcement if somebody's trying to impede somebody from voting. Hopefully that's not going to happen in Sonoma County, but we just don't know. I mean, I think people are very emotional about this election. People have very strong feelings. They don't have enough resources to deal with those strong feelings. You know, you heard about the lack of mental health care in Sonoma County and really throughout our nation. So when people have, troubled feelings, they don't have an appropriate place to deal with those. And some people may choose to deal with those feelings inappropriately. So observers kind of will get training on how to de-escalate a situation, how to have a civil dialogue about people's concerns, and hopefully get people in a calm state of mind to where they're not infringing on somebody's right to vote. So it's using a lot of the same techniques that are used to de-escalate any troubling situation. It's helping people calm down, helping people express themselves, and helping people act appropriately. So it's a little different skill set.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. So revisiting recent circumstances, COVID, wildfires, recession, educating children, job loss, and so on, it would seem that many of these issues would cause a low voter turnout. However, instead, we appear to be seeing unusually high, potentially record-breaking numbers for early voter turnout in other states. Can you explain what's going on?
Well, I think that people know that there's a lot of really important issues on the ballot. It's not just who's president, but I do think the presidential election feels very consequential to people, and so they feel like it's a very important time to vote. But I think people are really understanding how many other things are on the ballot and how many other important decisions are going to be made, such as who's in the Senate, who's in Congress, who's on a local level representing us on school boards, who's representing us on city and town councils, because a lot of the decisions they're making affect our daily lives. I mean, that's who's determining where we're going to have COVID testing and how much. That's who's determining how long our restaurants and businesses have to stay closed. That's who's determining when our kids can go back to school. Mm-hmm. So people, I think, are seeing how people at every elected level are impacting our daily lives because of COVID. Again, this is maybe one of the silver linings, that people are seeing firsthand all the decisions that get made at every level and how that impacts their daily lives. And so it's not something they can ignore anymore. It's not something they can say, well, so-and-so who's real politically active, I know they'll vote on that. I'm not too worried about that. People are realizing how much their daily lives get affected by these decisions. And so I think that's why you're seeing a higher level of participation. They want to make sure that the right people that reflect their values are in those decision-making positions. And they don't want to leave it up to somebody else, because somebody else may not see it the same way they do. And so they want to have people that are going to create the kind of community they want to live in. And so we're starting to see how many decisions affect our daily lives, because there's no place else to go is the other thing. I think, other people might say, well, I'll go on vacation. I'll go somewhere else till this is all over. Well, guess what? It's really hard to go on vacation right now. Mm-hmm. So we're stuck. We're in the midst of it. We're forced to pay attention to what's going on. If I'm forced to pay attention, then I might as well try and change the situation. So I think in a kind of roundabout way, people are maybe also feeling empowered. Mm-hmm. Like, here's one thing I can do about this horrible situation I'm in. I can at least pick the leaders that are going to make decisions about my daily life.
Very good. Thank you. Debbie, how may residents contact the League of Women Voters if they choose to?
Well, there's several ways you can contact us. You can go to our webpage, which is lwvsonoma.org. And there's a ton of information on there. There's information about how to get involved, how to join, how to make a donation. If you're interested specifically in volunteering, you can send an email to info@lwvsonoma.org, and that we'll pick up that email and we'll figure out who's the best person to talk to you. We have a number of committees. We have a voter services committee that's doing the forums that I was just talking about, the pros and cons, registering people to vote. We have another committee that does the community outreach, doing voter registration, and is also working on, we're doing something exciting. We're putting together videos to share with high school teachers and high school students about voting and the voting process. And so our committee is working on that right now, since we can't go out in the community. We used to go in the classroom. We also used to go in the jail. We used to go in the jail and register the inmates. And so I don't know if we're going to be able to get these videos into the jail, but we're going to at least put them together and make them available. So we this year had a centennial committee that celebrated our 100th birthday and the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote. We also have an advocacy committee. So the League is a political organization, not partisan, so we don't support a particular party, or we don't support candidates, but we do look at issues. So a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, we did a big report about affordable housing and homelessness, and shared that with a lot of elected officials. So we do that. We take on issues, we study issues, and our advocacy committee is the group that does that. And that's also the group that looks at whether we want to support ballot measures. The board ultimately decides, but the committee studies the issues.
All right. Thank you. Debbie and Mary Frances, what words of wisdom might you want to leave with our listeners? If nothing else, your contact information once again.
To reach NAMI, you can call us, 866-960-6264.
Okay, thank you.
Or email, info@namisoco.org.
And then your website?
I had two thoughts since listening to Debbie about things I didn't say that I would like to have said. One is, it's important for your mental health, connect with somebody you care about. That's really important. And about men, statistics, research tells us that middle-aged men are much more likely to take their lives. They're one of the highest risk groups, not the only one, but that tells us something about men having a difficult time. So maybe women are it's much easier for them to say, I need help. We know that it's much easier for women to seek medical help. So that's probably very likely the same case with reaching out for help with mental health. So men need encouragement and support and connection too.
Thank you. Debbie?
Well, I would say that if people want to make a difference in their community, find a way to volunteer. Find a way to get civically engaged. Create the community you want to live in. It happens through all of us participating. It's not time to say, well, let Mary do it or let John do it. It's time for us to think about what can we contribute to our community, whether it's working in a food bank, whether it's working on to get Measure O passed, whatever it is, whatever makes your heart sing, that's going to bring you joy. If you're having a hard time getting through the coronavirus, find something that brings you joy. And volunteering, helping others, brings us more joy than a lot of other things we could do. And so I really encourage people to take this time and reflect and think about, how can I get more involved in my community? How can I connect? How can I reach out? How can I make somebody else's life a little bit better? Because when you're making somebody else's life a little better, you're also making your own life better. And it will seem effortless if you're focused on the other person. So I really encourage people, take up the civic engagement and think about, how can I give back to my community right now? Be creative during this time of COVID. There are many, many organizations that could use your help and support right now.
Excellent. Do you want to leave your contact information once again?
Yes, go to our website, lwvsonoma.org, or send us an email at info@lwvsonoma.org, and we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you. So again, we've been chatting today with Debbie McKay, President of the Sonoma County League of Women Voters, and Mary Frances Welch, Executive Director of Sonoma County National Alliance on Mental Illness. Thank you, Debbie and Mary Frances, for joining us on this maiden voyage of Women in the Situation Room. Listeners, you may visit the Sonoma County Commission on the Status of Women at sococsw.org or on Facebook at Sonoma County Commission on the Status of Women. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to tend to some self-care, as well as get out and vote, Sonoma County, and wear your mask. You've been listening to Women in the Situation Room on KPCA-LP Petaluma 103.3 FM and KPCA.FM. Thank you.
We could be giving up a chance to say something. We could be giving up a chance to take part. We could be giving up a piece of our future. We could be giving up a piece of our hearts. You can make it matter to you. Vote. You can vote. You can vote. Too many people hitting rock bottom as the tower is falling apart. The system can't afford it. Long way to go, but it's just the start. You can help them make it matter to you. Vote. You can vote. If you're of age, you've really got a lot of power. If you can vote and don't, you can't complain. Time to act is getting shorter by the hour. You can help it, make it matter to you. Vote. You can vote. You can vote. Presidents, senators and congressmen, don't let them fool you once again. Presidents, senators and congressmen, don't let them